What's up guys? Today we're gonna take a look at patches in Maya and we start right now. So patches, there's a lot of them in Maya, usually, like millions or zillions of them. Oh, not really, but it can be a lot on an object, so it can also be very tricky to navigate around. So first off, I want to look at patches. So patches is these guys, and the patches is also, it's UV. So I went through this in the introduction to the UV, and let's take a look at patches. We have the patch menu here, so we can copy and paste things between patches. Let's make a layer. Patches in Maya is essentially the UVs, and to be able to copy and paste stuff, it's usually good to lay out the UVs in a at least at the moment, because you can't really in a nice way mirror paint. So therefore I have laid out the UVs in a symmetrical way, so they are identical on both sides. So if I would paint something here on this side and I want to mirror it to the other side, you see, and we look at the patches now. Let's see where it is. Let's actually isolate only this one. So I'm gonna go into how I select stuff in a moment. Okay, so this is my object, and here's the patches, and you see it's identical on both sides. So this is usually how I lay out UVs at the moment, because it's easy for me to copy and paste, because now I can just select this patch, copy and paste it to that patch, because it's mirrored. So now copy and paste, and now when we look, we have mirrored paint on the both sides. So that's something you can do to mirror paint. But yeah, your UVs has to be laid out like this to be able to copy and paste it easily. And also the patches is essentially, you see the number here, it tells you what size your texture is gonna be painted in. So for example, sometimes you're painting on something like 4K or 8K textures, and at the moment my channel is set to 248, but you could essentially upres certain areas if you want to. So there's a few ways to do that. You can go to patches, resize selected, and then you can choose a patch size. You can also right click and go to patches, resize selected here. So let's say we're gonna resize this to 4K. So now it's gonna, yeah, you see down there in the bottom, it's 4K. So yeah, that's the way. And let's see here, you have patches. So you have the copy and paste. You can fill a patch. Let's fill it with black, patch, fill, gray, fill, white, transparent. You can also extract a patch to image manager. So let's do that. Let's say patch to image manager, and just give it a second. Image manager. Okay, so there we have it. It's extracted to the image managers, and sometimes you want to do something with a patch. You can extract it and export it, just that patch. There's also, if you look at patches here, you have a few options out here as well, so you can see the UV mask thingy, kind of. Let's go back to UV. So UV rendering, UV mask, and sometimes you might want to do something. You can extract the UV mask to the image manager as well. So if I go to right click patches, UV mask to image manager, that's gonna, so here we get the UV mask, so you can use it for masking stuff. Yeah, so there's also options to link patches. Link selected patch images. Let's see, where were they? So if I now paint here, it automatically transfers to the other side. So if you have a symmetrical object, you could essentially do this. Yeah, and you might have to unlink it as well. So patches, link, unlink if you don't want it to appear anymore. So now let's see, paint there, and it's not gonna paint on the other side. Yeah, okay. So you can also do on a patch level, let's see, you can flip the patch. It doesn't make sense in my case, but if you would have something that needs to be flipped, let's flip it back. You can rotate different ways, mirror. So you might have a other layout that's not symmetrical as I am, more like a mirrored. You might have to paint one thing, copy it over, and then maybe flip it or mirror it. Depends on how you have laid out your UVs to get it to fit. We have another option here for patches, and that's bleeding. So let's take a look at bleed patch edges. So in my case, you see here it's it's a baked occlusion. So let's turn off. You see here, I guess it's gonna render okay. But if I would select something here, take this one for example, go to patches and bleed patch edges. I need to be in the right layer, and let's turn off. And here we see now it has extended the pixels outside the patch. Let's turn on UV rendering. Oops. So you see the difference here now. If I take this one, patches, bleed edges, it extends the border pixels, so you will not, if you get some rendering errors, you might want to bleed the edges on a patch. Can be a good option. So yeah, that's the edge bleeding. So to see that, you have to either turn off this guy, the, what's it called, UV image rendering, or you can select this one, that's whole patch. So yeah, the bleed edges. Let's take a look at different ways to select objects and manipulate selections. And yeah, let's dive into it. So we have this Gatling gun character here, and there's a lot of individual objects and pieces, and sometimes you want to work on a specific part of it. So we have a few tools to manipulate selections and how we paint, because sometimes it's tricky to paint objects if you have the whole object visible. So let's take a look at what we can do. So first off, we have the selection tab up here. First off you have the front and the through. So if I in patch mode, so we have a few modes here. This is the whole object. So if you have, I don't really use that one. So I usually use patch mode or this one, the face mode. So the patch mode is tied into actually the UV patches. So if I go to UV view, so here's all the patches for this object. So it selects the whole patch, and the face one is just gonna select wherever faces. If I'm not in you have a smart selection here. I'm gonna go into that. So this is, you're only gonna take the faces. Let's go back to orthographic. So let's say you want to work on this, but as you see, I'm in the front mode, so that is only gonna select everything that's facing the camera. So if you put this to through, let's take a look now, and you see it selects through the object. So that's good sometimes. Yeah, so then you want to isolate this. So you have a few options to do that. You can either Shift H, that hides everything else except the selected. Control Shift H unhides. And sometimes you want to maybe just hide a specific object. Let's go to patch mode. So this is patches. So I select those patches, and you want to hide it. So you can press the H button, and that will hide just the selected ones. Control Shift H, bring it back. And then you have, similar to in Maya, you have this Control 1. So let's select something here, Control 1, that isolates only that selection. So Control 1 again, brings it back. So that's good. And let's go to the side view here. So what else do we have? We have something here, the face mode. I went through that. It selects the faces, and you have a rectangle, you have a freeform, and like a polygon. So yeah, And then you have the smart selection, I think it's called. And that works. Let's take it to, let's select, oops, let's take this one. So the smart one, and if you're in face mode and the smart one, you have this smart type. Connected mesh, for example. Let's take that one. Let's take it here on and then it builds topology first, the first time. So you see, then it tries to, yeah, it takes the object, because if I was in connected UVs, if you look at this now, it's gonna be a different outcome. It's just gonna take the UV patches or the connected UVs. So it's gonna, if you look here and then you look in the patch, it's only gonna take the contained UVs. But then you can shift, you can add, Control Shift, the regular type of selection. So Shift adds, Control subtracts. So I usually either use I use patches and isolate stuff. Maybe I want to, let's take through here. Let's say I want to paint the tire, except this one. Then I go to Control 1. Then I have the tires. And then I say, oh, I want to paint one of the tires. Then I can take this one, Control H, Control Shift H to reveal it. And let's see here. So let's go back to the face and the smart selection. So we have the connected mesh that's gonna take the whole mesh. And we have the UV and edge angles. This is something I must be honest, I don't really use. But you have a smart angle. It's probably good for some uses. I think it's a little hard to control this one. So what you have up here, you can grow, but it's I don't know. I think it's a little hard to control this one. Orientation. So this is an angle thing. I guess has its uses. I don't really use it though. But yeah, you have to figure this out yourself. Oops. And selection group. I don't have any selection groups at the moment. So let's make one. Selection groups. So if you make a selection, anything, let's say you want to select those faces, and then you can hit the plus button down here. I can name it Top Gun. So the selection group, if you right click here, if you don't have it, if you right click, you can find it in the list here. So there you see, now I can delete those. So now I have my selection group. This is the original one I imported. So for example, you want to isolate that wheel and have it on its own. You can store that selection here in the selection group. Wheel. I don't use selection groups that much either, because I usually just hide and unhide stuff here on the fly with Control 1 and jump around. I think it's often much easier to just isolate stuff like this. So Control 1 is something I use like all the time. If I want to dive into something and maybe I want to paint this one, Control 1, then I have it. And then you can, if you hit the A button, it will frame it like in the viewport. And likewise the F, it's similar, it's more like it frames where your cursor is. So the A button is something if you want to jump into a specific selection. Maybe you want to paint this thing, hit the A1, then you get it. Then you might hit the Control 1 and then you have it on its own. Start to paint, Control 1 again to get it back. I hope you enjoyed this episode from the Mari channel about patches and how we select stuff in Mari. And if you want to support me, just hit that subscribe button and make sure to tick the bell notification as well. And you will be notified whenever I put stuff up on my channel.